Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Dr. Will again. So where I'm at now is about 30 miles south of Vicksburg at a place called Grand Gulf, Mississippi, which at one point was a town. It's not today, but the state of Mississippi has done a pretty remarkable job of historical preservation here. So here's why Grand Gulf is important in the grand scheme of the Vicksburg campaign. I mentioned to you when we were at Grants Canal this morning that after several attempts to bypass the city, General Grant in April of 1863 finally just said to heck with it and just ran his boats, his gunboats and transports past the guns on the bluff. They made it south of there. And once they made it south, then what Grant's able to do is march his army down the west bank or the Louisiana side of the river, and then he can cross over south of Vicksburg. Well, the original place he intended to cross over and attack was right here at Grand Gulf. Grand Gulf was founded in the early 1700s by the French. This was originally a French settlement when France controlled this area. And there wasn't much to it. They established it as a military outpost and a trading post for the Choctaw Indians. But the town didn't do much until the early 1800s when cotton really exploded and blossomed. And Grand Gulf at one point by the 1830s had a population of about 1,000. The reason is because it's located in a wide spot in the Mississippi River. I know the whole river's wide, but we're sort of a little bay there, which is where it gets the name Grand Gulf. And it was an excellent point for local planters to move their cotton down here, and then you can load it up on steamboats and ship it out to market. The problem is that heyday didn't last very long due to a couple of disasters. In 1843, the town was hit with a yellow fever epidemic, which wiped out a lot of the town. And then about 10 years later, it got destroyed by a tornado. There wasn't a whole lot left by the time the Civil War happened, but you've got bluffs here, like you do all along this stretch of Mississippi River. It's what made Vicksburg important. And this was a place that the Confederates fortified. So after Grant had run those transports and ironclads past the bluffs on the river, they come south, and Grand Gulf's where he plans to attack, but the Confederates were ready for him. The Confederate general in Vicksburg, General John Pemberton, who by all accounts is not a good general, he does make a good decision by sending a division of men under General John S. Bowen of Missouri to Grand Gulf to fortify this area. So a lot of Missouri Confederate troops are here. And on April 29th of 1863, there's an attack made. 6 Union gunboats bombard this position, trying to soften it up for Grant to land. And after they do a little bit of damage, they displace some guns, but one of the Union gunboats, the Tuscumbia, gets knocked out of action, and they finally decide to give up here and go down the river to a place called Bruinsburg, which was very lightly defended. That's where Grant eventually landed his troops and then marched on Port Gibson. But I want to show you some interesting things here in this location. Where I'm standing at right now is at a place called Fort Wade. So this is one of the areas where the Confederates would have had a fort. So you can see some rifle pits right down here along the bottom of this bluff, or down a little bit, so the trenches. And this little structure that's covered here is what is left of the ammunition supply dump. So this is where the fort or the Confederate defenders here would have stored all their ammunition. Now, the reason there's a big crater in the ground is because on May the 3rd, once they realized that Grant had bypassed this area and it was vulnerable to be taken from the rear, they blew this up and got the hell out of Dodge. A couple of interesting things you can still see here. Of course, you see the big hole at the bottom. There are some rails here that were, sign says, they look newer than that, but the sign says they were part of the city jail. The original city jail, of course, by the time this battle happened in 1863, Grand Gulf the Yankees had already burned it down twice, and there wasn't a whole lot left, and they moved the jail into the ammo dump. And supposedly those rails are what's left. They look a whole lot newer than 160 years old, so I'm not sure I'm buying that. But what happened here is that in the 1960s, the state of Mississippi, this land was donated to the state, and they made it a state military park. And I think they've done a really remarkable job of historical preservation here. You know, the big national parks are the ones that get all the love because they've got all the resources. Some of these states do a great job with not as many resources. So let me just show you a couple of things right here at this spot, and then I'll take you driving around. Now you'll notice, let me kind of walk up on the hill a little bit, that you can't really see the river here, right? Well, the river shifted. In 1862, it would have been a lot closer. It probably would have been, if you can see through the trees there, in 1862, the river probably would have been about where that little house is, maybe a little further back. So they're pretty close to where the gunboats would have been shelling. But it shifted, and we'll drive by the river. Now this structure is interesting. This structure here is, they call it the Spanish house. This was built in the 1790s by the Spanish right here on this spot. By that point, France had, as part of their defeat in the French and Indian War, had ceded big portions of, well, they'd ceded all of Louisiana territory to Spain, at least a part of it this close to the river. And so the Spanish by 1790s had control of this area, and this house was built during the Spanish period. It got hammered during the bombardment during the war, and what you're seeing here now is it's mostly original. It has been reconstructed to a degree. They replaced some of the damage and put some new wood there, but for the most part, the structure remains as it has since the 1790s, which is pretty remarkable. This is cool. One of the things I love about going to battlefields is looking at the old artillery. So what you've got here is a mortar. Now, this probably is a Union mortar, which means probably what they would have done with it, this would have been mounted on like a little raft, sort of. They called them motor boats. I mean, they were self-propelled, but they were used on the Mississippi by the Union Mississippi Squadron to shell positions along the shore. Particularly when you had a strong position at a bend in the river, you know, you have a hard time to get around that bend. You've got to expose your ship to plunge and fire. So one of the things you can do with mortars is they have a real high trajectory, and you could be on the other side of the bend, shoot it up and over onto the other side of the river. So that's probably what this would have been used for. How'd you like to have a shell from that bad boy coming at you? No thanks. Alrighty. Well, I'll tell you what. Let us get in the truck, and I'm going to just briefly drive around the park here and show you some interesting things. And then we'll drive down by the river so you can get a shot of that. If you ever have a chance to come out here, this is really a fascinating place. There's really, I think admission to get into the park was $4. I mean, you can't beat that. They've got a museum that's fantastic, including, to me, look like 3 original Confederate battle flags. There's only one they know anything about. It was a local regiment called the Claiborne Guards, and it's a First National flag, meaning the stars and bars pattern, not the battle flag pattern. But then they had 2 others that were, one was a Third National, and then one was the battle flag, and they don't have any information on them, but man, they look old. By the way, for information on what I'm talking about, this flag they've got flying right here, that's what's called a First National Confederate flag, or the stars and bars. All right, let me put my seatbelt on real quick so this does not beep the whole time, and please try to ignore the junk in my truck. Oh, there we go. All right, let me back up, get out of here. I'll show you around. This is really a neat little park, and if you're ever in this area, it's well worth checking out. They've even got an RV park here, or you can stay. Hint, hint, Sarah. I'd be down to coming back and staying and exploring this area a little bit longer. know this part's the content everybody's enjoying, right? Sorry about that. But I really want to show you around, and I'm too old and fat to walk the whole park. Plus you don't want to hear me huffing and puffing the whole time. Okay, so if you look down the hill there, you'll see they've reconstructed a lot of the buildings here. So there's an old stable there that is reconstructed from the one that existed there in the 1830s. Here's on the left is a mill pond. And then right there is an old water wheel. It's pretty neat. That dog trot house that you see right there, I read on one of the signs that it came from a nearby county. It wasn't originally here, but they moved it here. And that's typical early 19th century Southwest United States pioneer architecture. Remember, in the 1820s and 30s, Alabama, Mississippi was the Southwest. You know, Louisiana, that was the Southwest. We don't think of it like that today. But that's typical pioneer architecture. You'd build a house, and if you wanted more room, you'd build another one and then cover the walkway between. It's called a dog trot. By the way, there's a sign right there that says no swimming. I don't know why you'd want to go swimming in that mill pond, but what that tells me is at some point somebody's tried it. Okay. And then right over here, this is really cool. This is an old Catholic church that originally was located just a few miles away at the ruins of a plantation called Windsor. And they moved it here. It was an active parish up until about, I guess, the 1950s, and then they but that was built in, I believe, 1866, and pretty much it exists intact. Everything inside's original. It's today a non-denominational chapel. If you're around here, you can go in there and pray, and they keep it open for weddings and services and things like that. It's not a working parish anymore, but it's just a beautiful, beautiful church. Okay, let's go up the hill a little bit. Like I said, this was a little bit, by the 1830s, there were around 1,000 people that lived here in Grand Gulf. And up the hill here, we're going to run into the cemetery. And I walked through here earlier. You can see some graves here going back to the 1830s and 40s, which is pretty remarkable. Many of them probably died during that yellow fever epidemic in 1843. So it's coming up here on the left. So you can see that's a really old cemetery. There's an old head's tombstone right there. Pretty well preserved, given the fact that probably none of these families are around here at all anymore. Maybe some are. But this was the Grand Gulf Cemetery, which you can see at one point there were enough people living here to have that many tombs. Now, there's an observation tower earlier. I climbed up that thing earlier. That's hard on a fat man. And I was hoping there was a good view up here. I was going to do some of this from up there, but you can only get a very small glimpse of the river through the trees. And I thought, I'll just take you on a driving tour. Now here on the left, you can see some Confederate rifle pits. So you can see just to the left of the trees here. Basically, these are the trenches, and you can see the indentations are still there. These, according to that sign, these would have been occupied by the 6th Missouri Confederate during the bombardment on April 29th, 1863. Again, they're further back than the guns. They're here in case there's a landing, they'll spring into action. There wasn't much infantry action during the actual battle. It was mostly bombardment. Those 6 Union ironclads versus the Confederate guns on the bluff. Here, coming up on the left, we've got a gun emplacement, and this is kind of neat. So that's where they, if you look here, this is where they would have had artillery sighted. And again, the artillery's placed here. This is probably, they might have been firing at the guns on the river, but this artillery is also designed or placed here to protect the infantry in these rifle pits in case there was a landing. But most of these guns probably would have been using more, I'm guessing, more anti-personnel rounds. The ones closer, the ones back at Fort Wade where we were, you're talking Parrott rifles mostly, which were very, very accurate. Anytime whether you're talking about artillery or small arms, a rifle gun's always going to be more accurate than a smoothbore. And you can see from the terrain here that this part of Mississippi is, Mississippi's pretty flat, but this part of the state, Warren County, this part of Claiborne County, right close to the river, are some very steep bluffs. And so there's a lot of bluffs, a lot of ravines, that kind of thing, mostly due to the shifting course of the river. Here's where another gun emplacement would have been. So you can see what that's designed. Basically what these fortifications made was a ring around Grand Gulf. And you'll see some more of this stuff at Vicksburg when we do the Vicksburg video. Oh, see, you don't want to get a shot of the sky or of my, there we go, or of my rear view mirror, or the crack in my window. Now, this is heavily wooded right now. You understand that during the war, all this would have been cleared out. So this growth wouldn't have been there. The Confederates would have cleared this out, so they had a clear line of fire. So this part of the battlefield doesn't look like what it would have looked like in 1862 or 1863. All this would have been cleared out. Most of the stuff here, the military stuff, we've already seen. By the way, the RV park wouldn't have been here in 1863 either. That's a new invention. Probably been a lot easier for the troops though. Sleeping out under a piece of canvas stinks. If you've got at least a bed and a TV to watch DVDs on, that would make fighting probably a lot easier. It's all sarcasm, by the way, which I think most of you know, but some may not. It's another little pond in which you are not allowed to swim. Let's get down here, and we've got to go through part of go by the RV park. Let's ride down to the river so you can see where the river would have been at the time and where it is shifted to today. And then we'll end this little video I hope you've been enjoying these. I'm having a whole lot of fun making them and talking about them. This is teaching and talking about history is my favorite thing to do. And I feel pretty lucky that I get to make a profession out of it. So we'll go back. There's the visitor center, by the way. But the museum inside there is really well done. Again, I highly recommend, if you're ever in this area, take the time. If you ever come to Vicksburg, take the time to come down here and check out Grand Gulf. It's really well done. And these little state parks, they don't get the funding that the big national parks do. So anything that you can do to help them out is highly appreciated. So we'll drive down the river road here. And we'll go down, just take a look at the river, and then we'll end the video. Probably in 1863, the main river channel would have passed somewhere right around here. So again, this river shifts a lot. The main part of the river at Vicksburg is not where it was in 1863, and probably in the main channel of the river would have been somewhere right around, just maybe a couple hundred yards back where we were. So there you see it, the mighty Mississippi. And you can understand why this river was so crucial for both armies to control. If the Union controls it, they cut the Confederacy in half. Also, northern farmers can ship their goods to market. Remember, the Mississippi River starts all the way up in Minnesota. And it's the main way that farmers got their goods to international markets. For the Confederacy, you have to hold it so you can get reinforcements from what's called the Trans-Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Texas. And I'll show you to the right real quick, and then we'll end it. You can see so you can see the main channel of the river, and it makes a little bend right there and goes off to the left, and then right here there's a little bit that swings over to the right. That's the Grand Gulf. That's how this town, this area got its name, because that's the wide spot in the river. Again, that shifted a little bit because in 1862 and 63, the Grand Gulf would have been pretty much right back there where the town was. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little video. Stay tuned. I'll probably do a little live stream tomorrow with my friend Dr. Andy Lang. And then most of that I'll edit for a future video, but we'll do a little bit of live stream just to kind of talk about what we're doing. May or may not do some other things this afternoon, but kind of stay tuned. Hope you enjoyed this. Have a great day, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Dr. Will's History Road Trip. If you like what I'm doing and want to continue following, please subscribe to my channel and click the notification button so you'll get updates when I post new content. Also, please consider supporting me via PayPal, Venmo, or CashApp. Your support will enable me to go to interesting places and film them and talk about them with you. Feel free to suggest locations that you might like to see me visit in the comments below. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the road.